See, I'm not anti-DC. And the film actually has just a myriad of plot holes that are never addressed. But the ultimate cut, which I didn't think was as bad. I mean, I think it's more watchable in spite of the fact that it's made a really long movie ridiculously longer. It answers a lot of those plot holes. We start to see, oh, that's what that was. We also see, like in the scene where Luthor blows up the hearing, and Superman actually afterwards is helping recover bodies and stuff like that. So we see him being helpful, which is good. But the problem is that still doesn't help the theatrical cut, the version we saw in theaters. That said, there are things I liked in the movie. That opening sequence where it's the Zod Superman fight from the perspective of Bruce, where he's rushing in as Bruce Wayne, not as Batman, but he's rushing in to Metropolis to get to a building of his to try and help people. And his whole focus is his employees and helping people. I think that's a great scene. And it really gave a different perspective of the Zod fight, because we don't see the Zod fight close up. It's all from a distance. Oh yeah, and I do really love this moment.
It's okay. I'm a friend of your son's.
I figured. The cape?
Before you try and say, oh, but you know, but they were aiming for this. I'm just saying that I get what they aimed for. I know what Snyder and company were trying to do. They were doing the, is Superman hero or a threat? Is he a god or a monster? Can the public trust him? You know, stuff like that. And Batman, it was challenging Batman's role in the world. Should he, you know, that kind of stuff, I get it. I get it. It's just the film didn't achieve it very well. These are things the comics have explored, but they often organically worked their way through it. And the movie feels too rushed. Like, we got to get to this drama surrounding these characters. It feels like they cheat to get there. And the film continues Superman's my planet talk. On my planet. You know, and I guess it's one thing when he has a conversation like that with, say, General Swan, where he's kind of like, he's intentionally trying to be mysterious and alien. It's a whole other thing when that conversation is with Lois Lane. Lois is one of his human connections, and for him to be talking like he's otherworldly with her just seems unnatural, because that's the one place where he can be his human side. Lois is that freedom. It isn't until almost the end of the film that he starts talking as if this is his home. When he and Batman finally connect on we both had mothers named Martha. And I'm trivializing it, but the film doesn't do it very well, even though, I think they were trying to go for something for that connection where it's really meaningful, but it's just not effectively done in the film. Now, I said I didn't have a problem with Ben Affleck, and I'll even go on record this way. I think he's a good Batman. I especially really like the costume. Not the dopey metal costume, but more just the old-fashioned, the gray with the big bat on it. I thought that costume looked great. I've had arguments over that with people who were like, it looks all cross-stitched. But I liked it. I think it looked really good. But the mistake, I think it would have been better to have a Batman that's Clark's age. Since we're starting with their friendship, let's have a 32-year-old Batman. That puts him right in there with both Cavill and Godot. And that is, I just think that would have been a wiser move. It also would have solved future problems, like the invariable likelihood that they're going to hire a 30-year-old Catwoman, and if they do a Catwoman-Batman romance, well, Batman's like 50 and she's 30, It's like, oh, geez. I mean, some of that's getting better. I mean, Godot was was 32, and I get hiring both actors and actresses. Outside of Robert Downey Jr., most of Marvel's actors are mid-30s. And that works because you want the ability to have longevity so that they can at least make a few movies, appear in a few movies, and not look so visibly aging. And so I think it would have been wiser to aim ahead. Instead of a Batman that seems like he's already at the end of his rope, which both Batman v Superman and Justice League kind of present, a Batman who's having a hard time keeping up with this whole superhero gig now. But I think one thing that Snyder missed the boat on here really big time with as far as Batman's character, Batman can be dark and grim. That's not a problem. That is absolutely within the character's context. The guns. And Nolan had this problem too. Both of them presented a Batman who's just no problem using guns and blowing everything up. And I know, somebody's going to go back, somebody's going to comment and say, the early Batmans, he used a gun. And yes, in the very earliest issues of Detective Comics, he did. But as the years went by, and granted, part of this was he was a kid's comic character. He was aimed at kids, and they said, hey, maybe we shouldn't have guns. But it morphed into being a code against guns because his parents had been killed by a gun. He wouldn't use guns to fight crime. He wasn't going to be a murderer. And in this film, oh my gosh, guns everywhere. In fact, I think the only sequence where Batman isn't using a gun of his own is when he saves Martha Kent. And there, he's basically tricking the different thugs into killing each other, which I have less of a problem with Batman doing, where he's just, he's not the one taking them out. It's their own acts that are actually the ones taking each other out. Them taking each other out is less problematic to me than having Batman shooting people. In fact, I will admit, I expected at one point that Batman would suddenly have like little shoulder rockets that would pop up out of his outfit, a la Iron Man. Another thing that really got me in this was their odd choice of Lex Luthor. It's not that Jesse Eisenberg is too young. I mean, a young tech genius, that's actually a good take. It really is a logical evolution to modernize him from the way that John Byrne modernized him in 1986 Man of Steel as a businessman. In fact, I mean, those comics had great moments. Eisenberg plays him as this kind of twitchy weirdo. And so even though they have some good stuff, like where he's talking about, where he sees as an untrustworthy god, that's actually a good take as far as his attitude towards Superman. That works really well, and it's just unfortunate that he's like this misfit instead of this brilliant tech genius. I mean, he is the genius. He just plays him at the edge of sanity. He seems to have just kind of flipped out. His goal, he uses the dead body of Zod to create Doomsday. I mean, they really went all out to just kind of cobble together a wild and crazy collection of Superman and Batman stuff. Dark Knight Returns, Death of Superman. Oh, by the way, they kill Superman at the end in the fight with Doomsday. And when they kill him, all of a sudden everybody's sad. And there are people that should be sad. When we see Lois and Martha Kent. Those are people who should be sad, and both Wonder Woman and Batman are appropriately concerned. What does this mean now that Superman's dead? But again, it just kind of feels like all of a sudden the whole world's stunned by his death, and yeah. I just, if there had been a Man of Steel 2 ahead of this, where we got to see Superman just being Superman the whole film, I think the death would have had more of an impact. But it also doesn't help that the very last shot is... which doesn't actually pay off anywhere. Newsflash. I mean, it's clearly meant to be this dramatic, oh, Superman might be back. He might not be dead. And it never pays off. Justice League didn't pay it off. They came up with a whole different way to bring him back. So it's just a scene that's just there. And like I said, Man of Steel 2 could have built it up so that when we got to this in Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, the death felt powerfully meaningful. We had only had 2 movies, and one of them's a team-up. So it just kind of doesn't feel powerfully dramatic. Frankly, it's like, spoiler, pause. If you haven't seen Star Trek Into Darkness, if you haven't seen that movie where Khan is a white man, played by Doctor Strange, they kill Captain Kirk and save him 10 minutes later. Because they figured out by using a dead Tribble, they could resurrect the dead with Khan's blood. It's got about as much impact as that. Again, there are things I liked, as the previously mentioned opening sequence,
I'm a friend of your son's.
And in spite of the weird and rather weak Wonder Woman subplot, when she jumps into the final fight there, that kicks ass. That's a great sequence. I loved it. I also really liked how they played up overall Lois and Clark scenes. Towards the beginning, Superman brings home flowers and gets in the bathtub with Lois. It's just a cute scene that kind of emphasizes the relationship. I like how that plays out. And so and again, Lois Lane getting to do her reporter thing. I like that. Though Perry White is suddenly not interested in news. He just, we're a dying breed, and he's trying to save the paper. So Clark Kent, go cover Gotham's football team. And what I'm about to mention, I just want to throw this out here. I heard it. Movie Bob pointed it out. It's not something I arrived at myself. I just think it is a good point. The urban legend of the Batman is great tabloid fodder. Why isn't he going, yes, pursue this story? Though I still do like Lawrence Fishburne in the role. And I liked Jeremy Irons. I think Jeremy Irons was a good Alfred. That worked really well. That worked incredibly well to me. He's got a hint of sarcasm. He's seen, he's seen this stuff play out before. He knows what he's doing. He's up to date on tech, and so was the other. I mean, Nolan did that too. I mean, Michael Caine was another great Alfred.